The night was cold, and the junkyard stretched like a graveyard of forgotten machines. Piles of broken ships stood like dark mountains, their sharp edges cutting against the moonlight. The air was heavy with the smell of rust and smoke. Silence ruled this place, broken only by the whisper of wind moving through hollow pipes and broken metal frames. He walked slowly, his boots crunching on the scattered pieces of glass and steel. To most people, this place was worthless, a dump where old ships and alien machines were thrown away. But to him, it was survival. He often searched here for spare parts, food containers, or anything that could help him live another day in a world where everything was scarce. Yet tonight was different. He felt something strange, like the air itself was watching him. Then from deep inside the wreckage, a sound reached his ears. It was faint, weak, and almost broken. At first he thought it was a machine releasing air, but when he listened carefully, he realized it was a voice. A cry, soft, trembling, and filled with pain. He froze. His eyes scanned the darkness, searching between the heaps of metal. The sound came again, a low whimper that rose and fell. It was not human. It carried a strange tone, almost like a song mixed with a growl, but behind it was the same meaning every creature understood: fear and suffering. Cautiously, he followed the sound. His heartbeat grew louder as he stepped deeper into the maze of junk. The path was narrow, metal scraping against his shoulders as he pushed through. The cry grew sharper. His body tensed as he reached a corner where a broken starship lay half buried in sand and dust. Its body was torn apart, wires dangling like dead vines. And there, between the shadow of the ship's wing and the rubble, he saw her. She was lying on her side, her body curled like a child's, scales dull and cracked as if they had lost their glow long ago. Wings that once might have been majestic now looked torn, thin as paper, barely clinging to her back. Her chest rose and fell with effort, each breath sounding like a struggle against death itself. His breath caught. It was an alien dragon girl, something he had only heard about in whispered tales. A creature of legend said to be fierce and powerful, but this one was no hunter or warrior. She was starving, broken, and so weak she could hardly move. Her golden eyes opened slightly, glowing faintly in the dark, and in them he saw desperation. For a moment, he stepped back. His mind screamed at him to leave. This was dangerous. No one helped creatures like her. If others found out, they would turn on him, accuse him, maybe even kill him. The smart choice was to turn around and walk away. But his feet did not move. The girl let out another cry, softer than before, like she knew he was there but had no strength left to beg. Her hand, with long, delicate claws, twitched as if reaching for something that was no longer there. She looked like a child lost in endless darkness. Something inside him stirred. He had seen suffering before, had seen men and women broken by hunger, but this was different. This was innocence dying in silence. He could not shake the thought that if he left, she would not see another sunrise. He crouched down, his shadow falling over her. She blinked slowly, her breath rattling. Their eyes met for the first time. In that instant, there was no barrier of species, no fear of alien blood. There was only one truth: she needed help, and he was the only one there. He reached out his hand carefully, his palm open so she could see he carried no weapon. At first she did not react. Then her trembling fingers shifted, brushing against his skin with the lightest touch. The heat of her body was faint, almost gone, but her touch carried something that felt alive, a plea without words. He swallowed, hard. His heart raced. He knew this was the moment. Either he would walk away and let the world remain cold, or he would take the risk and do something no one else would. The cry among the ruins was fading. She was slipping further into weakness. He could see it in the way her eyelids grew heavier, in the way her breathing slowed. If he delayed even a little, it would be too late. With a firm decision, he slid his arms under her fragile body. She was lighter than he expected, bones sharp against her skin, wings folding weakly against him. For a second, she gave a startled sound, then went silent as he lifted her up. Her head rested against his chest, her faint breath brushing against his shirt. He rose to his feet, looking around the junkyard as if expecting eyes to appear in the shadows. No one was there, only the broken ships, the cold wind, and the silent witness of the stars. Holding her close, he turned away from the wreckage. The choice had been made. Tonight, in the heart of a forgotten junkyard, he had heard a cry, and answered it. And that single act would change everything. The junkyard was silent again, but his heart was not. Every step he took with her in his arms felt heavier than the last. The cold night pressed in around him, the sharp wind biting against his face. Yet the weight he carried was more than just the fragile body of an alien dragon girl. It was the weight of a decision that could not be undone. He knew the danger. Anyone who saw him with her would not think of kindness or mercy. They would see a threat, an alien that did not belong, a reason to punish him for stepping outside the rules of survival. Humans were taught to look after their own, and nothing more. To save her was to break that law. Yet he did not stop. Her faint breath warmed his chest. Her body trembled against him, and her wings hung lifeless. But even in her broken state, she was alive. That was enough. He kept walking, his boots crushing against the scattered debris, his eyes fixed on the path out of the graveyard. The night sky stretched above like a blanket of black silk with cold stars watching in silence. He wondered if the stars judged him, or if they were the only ones who understood why he could not walk away. When he reached the edge of the junkyard, he stopped to catch his breath. He laid her gently on a piece of cloth he carried in his bag. For a moment he studied her face. Though covered in dust and weakness, there was something striking about her. Her scaled skin carried patterns like ancient carvings, lines of silver, tracing down her arms and neck. Her golden eyes fluttered weakly, but when they opened, he felt the depth inside them. She was more than a creature. She was someone. He searched through his bag quickly, a small water flask, a piece of dry bread, and a packet of nutrient paste he had saved for himself. His hand shook slightly as he brought the water to her lips. She barely reacted at first, but when the cool liquid touched her mouth, her throat moved and she drank with slow, desperate gulps. He fed her the smallest pieces of bread, softening them with water so she could swallow. Minutes passed in silence, only broken by her uneven breathing. At last, her eyes opened wider, and for the first time they met his with something more than fear. There was a spark, faint, fragile, but real. He spoke, his voice low, unsure if she understood. "You are safe now. I will not leave you." She did not answer, but her eyes blinked once, slow and heavy, as if she had heard him. His chest tightened. That single blink felt like a thread connecting them, binding him to the choice he had made. He could no longer see her as a stranger. She was now a life he had sworn to protect. The night stretched on as he carried her toward the small shelter he had built at the edge of the wasteland. It was nothing more than a metal shack with scraps of old fabric for warmth, but it was his owner. When he pushed the door open with his foot and stepped inside, the warmth of the small fire welcomed them. He laid her down gently on the bedroll, covering her with his own blanket. She shivered, curling into the warmth, her wings twitching slightly. He sat near her, feeding the fire with pieces of wood. For a long time, he simply watched her breathe, wondering why fate had placed her in his path. He thought of all the warnings, the voices of others who would call him a fool. To them, saving her was weakness. But to him, it was the only thing that felt right. Maybe he was a fool. Maybe he had just invited danger into his life. But as he looked at her fragile form, he knew this choice would define him. Hours passed, and the firelight flickered against the walls. His eyes grew heavy, but he forced himself to stay awake, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the faint sound of her breath. Each small sign of life was a victory. At one point she stirred, her clawed hand reaching weakly into the space between them. Without thinking, he took it gently, his rough fingers closing around her trembling ones. The touch was cold at first, then warmed slowly. She did not let go. Something shifted in him at that moment. She was no longer just an alien he had saved from the junkyard. She was a responsibility, a fragile soul who had placed her trust in him without words. He realized that this was more than survival. This was about humanity. His humanity. The choice he made in that junkyard had already begun to change him, and deep inside, he felt it would change everything else too. The night had passed slowly, filled with the crackle of fire and the steady rhythm of her weak breathing. When dawn arrived, pale light spilled through the cracks in the shelter's walls. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes, his body aching from sitting awake most of the night. Still, he had no regret. Every hour he watched her chest rise and fall, he knew he had given her one more chance at life. But saving her was not simple. Now came the true battle. The struggle to keep her alive in a world where even humans barely had enough to survive. He knelt beside her, touching her forehead carefully. It was hot, burning with fever. Her wings twitched as if in restless dreams, and her skin looked dry, cracked where the silver patterns should have glowed. She needed more than bread and water. She needed strength, healing, and care. He was not sure he could provide. He stepped outside, the cold morning wind biting against his face. The wasteland stretched in every direction, broken ships and piles of metal shining under the rising sun. He knew there was food hidden somewhere, old ration packs, alien containers, even scraps left behind by scavengers. But to find it, he would have to search deeper into the junkyard, maybe even face others who would not hesitate to fight him for what little they could take. Still, he had no choice. He glanced back at the shack where she lay motionless under the blanket. If he delayed, she would not survive another day. The hunt for food began. He moved quickly through the wreckage, his eyes scanning for anything useful. He found an old supply crate half buried in sand. With effort, he pried it open and discovered dried grain sealed in metal packets. It was stale but still edible. He smiled faintly, relief washing through him. Yet food was not enough. She was weak, and her body was different. What if her kind needed something more? He remembered the faint glow in her eyes, the strange way her chest rose when she breathed. Perhaps her kind needed minerals, or energy, or even heat to survive. He had no answers, only questions, but he knew he had to try. By the time he returned, his arms carried more than food. He had gathered pieces of cloth, broken wires, and scraps of metal to strengthen the shelter. If she was to live, she needed safety and warmth. He built a stronger fire, surrounding it with stones to trap the heat. He boiled water in a small pot, softening the grain until it was almost a soup. When he fed her, he used a wooden spoon, lifting it carefully to her lips. At first, she did not respond, but when the warm liquid touched her tongue, she swallowed, weakly. He repeated the process again and again until she had taken enough to give her strength. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and then began to fall again. He stayed at her side, cleaning her wounds, covering her with cloth when she shivered, whispering words she might not even understand. "You are safe," he said softly. "I will not let you go." At times, her eyes opened slightly, glowing faintly like golden embers in the dark. She watched him, and though her lips never formed words, her gaze spoke louder than any language. It was trust, raw and fragile, given freely to him, but the fight was not without fear. As night returned, he heard distant voices outside the junkyard, other scavengers searching for metal and parts. His heart tensed. If they discovered her, they would not see a dying girl. They would see a prize, something rare and valuable to sell. He sat awake again, holding a piece of metal pipe as a weapon, his body ready to protect her. The night dragged on, filled with the threat of danger and the fragile sound of her breath. Every moment tested him. Each time she stirred in pain, he felt helpless. Each time the wind carried voices too close, he feared losing her. But he did not stop. He fed her, guarded her, and fought against the silence that tried to steal her away. This was no longer just a struggle for her life. It was his battle too, the battle to prove that one human heart could defy despair. When dawn returned again, he looked at her and saw something new. Her breathing was steadier. The glow in her eyes was a little brighter. Her hand, once too weak to move, now twitched slightly against the blanket. A small smile formed on his face. The fight was far from over, but the first signs of victory had arrived. And deep inside he knew, if he could keep her alive, everything would change. The second dawn broke with pale light spilling through the cracks of the shelter. He sat near the fire, his eyes heavy from lack of sleep, but his heart steady. Each night had been a battle against time, but now something was changing. The alien dragon girl's breaths were stronger, her chest rising with more rhythm than before. Her color had returned slightly, the silver lines on her skin glowing faintly in the firelight. He watched her closely as she stirred, her claws curling against the blanket. For days, she had only survived in silence, opening her eyes briefly before slipping back into weakness. But now, there was a shift. She was not only alive, she was waking. Her golden eyes blinked slowly. The firelight reflected inside them, making them shimmer like molten metal. She looked at him, her gaze clearer than before. He leaned forward, his voice calm and steady. "You are safe. Do not be afraid." She did not respond, but her eyes followed his every movement. He poured water into a small cup and held it near her lips. This time she drank more willingly, her throat moving with effort. A faint sound escaped her, a broken murmur, rough and weak, but not meaningless. He froze. His heart raced. She had tried to speak. He leaned closer, whispering softly. "Say it again, I'm here." Her lips parted, trembling with the weight of her voice. The words came broken, almost like the growl of an animal mixed with the softness of a child. "Why, save me?" The question struck him deeper than he expected. Her first words were not of gratitude or fear, but confusion. Why had he saved her? He sat in silence for a moment, his throat dry. Then he answered in the only way he could. "Because life matters. Because you matter." Her eyes glimmered, tears forming like liquid gold. She turned her face slightly as if ashamed, but her body trembled less now. It was not just food or warmth that gave her strength. It was knowing someone cared. He fed her again, spoon by spoon, speaking gently between each bite. At first she remained quiet, but soon her voice returned in short, broken words. She told him she had been left behind, abandoned when she became weak. She spoke of hunger, of wandering through the ruins until her strength failed, of crawling into the shadow of a broken ship to die unseen. Her voice cracked when she described it, but he never interrupted. He listened, his heart heavy with each word. When her story faltered, he answered with steady assurance. "You are not alone now. I will not leave you." The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the fragile trust of two beings, from different worlds, bound together by a choice made in a junkyard. As the hours passed, her voice grew stronger. She asked simple questions in her broken tongue: who he was, why he lived in such a place, why he gave her his food when he clearly had so little. He answered each with honesty. He told her his name, told her how the world had become harsh, and told her that kindness was the only thing left that made him feel human. Her gaze softened with each reply. For the first time since he found her, her lips curved slightly into what could only be called a smile. It was faint, fragile, but it lit her face with something he had not seen before. Hope. The fire burned low as evening approached. She lay back against the blanket, her eyes still on him. Her voice, though quiet, carried a new strength when she spoke. "Thank you." He felt the words settle deep inside him, heavier than any burden. They were not just thanks. They were a promise. A bond formed in the ashes of despair. Outside, the night crept in again. Shadows stretched across the wasteland, and the voices of distant scavengers echoed faintly in the wind. Danger was still near, but in that small shelter, a new beginning had been born. The dragon girl had spoken, and with her first words the silence between them was broken forever. The days that followed were quiet but not empty. Each sunrise brought a little more strength to the alien dragon girl. Her golden eyes stayed open longer, her words grew clearer, and her voice carried more than pain. It carried memory. He noticed, at first in the way she looked at the fire. At night, when the flames danced against the walls of the shelter, her gaze turned distant. Her claws would tighten against the blanket, and her wings would twitch as if remembering some unseen burden. He did not press her with questions. He simply sat nearby, waiting for the moment when her silence would break. It happened one evening when the wind outside howled through the wreckage and the fire burned low. She spoke softly, her words halting but full of weight. "They left me." He turned his head, watching her carefully. Her voice trembled, yet she forced herself to continue. "My people, they fear weakness. The strong survive. The weak are abandoned." Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time, he saw not only exhaustion but shame. She turned her face slightly away, as if the words were too heavy to share. He leaned forward, his voice calm. "You were not weak. You were starving. Hurt. That is not weakness." But she shook her head, her wings trembling with the motion. "To them, it is. To fail, to fall behind, means you are nothing. I was nothing." Her words struck deep inside him. He had heard of cruel customs among alien species, but hearing it from her lips was different. She was living proof of a truth too bitter to imagine. A child cast aside not because she was evil, but because she was fragile. She whispered again, her voice breaking. "They left me in the junkyard, to fade away unseen. No song, no goodbye, only silence." Tears slipped from the corners of her golden eyes, rolling down the cracked lines of her scaled face. She did not cry loudly. Her sorrow was quiet, like a wound carried too long. He felt his chest tighten. He reached out, resting his hand gently over hers. "You are not nothing," he said firmly. "You are alive. You are here. And I will not let you be forgotten." Her eyes widened, meeting his. For a long moment, neither spoke. The crackle of fire filled the silence, carrying warmth into the cold night. Slowly she nodded, though her tears did not stop. That night she spoke more, fragments of her life slipping through the cracks of her broken voice. She told him about her people, the dragon clans who soared across alien skies, their wings carrying them between mountains and stars. She told him about the pride of her kind, their songs of victory, their endless hunger for strength. But hidden between her words was a truth she could not hide. She had never been like them. She was smaller, softer, her wings weaker. She had always struggled to keep up, always been left behind. And when hunger struck and her body failed, her people made their choice. They cast her aside. The story left him silent. He could picture it in his mind, the proud dragons flying high above, leaving behind the one who could not match their strength. It filled him with anger, but also sorrow. She had been condemned not for her sins, but for her fragility. When her voice finally fell silent, she looked at him with fear, as if expecting him to judge her too, but he did not. He only placed more wood on the fire, letting the flames grow brighter. "You survived," he said softly. "Even when they left you, even when you had nothing, you held on. That is not weakness. That is strength." Her golden eyes widened again, and this time, the tears that rolled down her face were not only from sorrow, they were from something else, something she had never felt before. Hope. As the fire warmed the shelter, she leaned slightly toward him, her voice softer than the wind. "Why do you care?" He thought about the question. The answer was simple, yet heavy with meaning. "Because if humanity forgets how to care, then we are no better than those who left you. To save you is to save myself too." Her gaze lingered on him, as if those words were foreign yet unforgettable. For the first time she closed her eyes not in despair but in rest, her body easing into sleep without fear. He sat watching her, the fire crackling steadily. Her whispers of the past had revealed more than her pain. They had revealed who she truly was. And in that truth he realized something. She was no longer just a dying alien girl he had rescued. She was a voice that deserved to be heard, a soul that deserved to live, and he would fight to make sure her story did not end in silence. The days of quiet healing could not last forever. Though the shelter grew warmer and the alien dragon girl found her strength again, danger was never far. The junkyard had always been a place where scavengers prowled, and now whispers carried across the wasteland. Strange voices were heard at night and footsteps pressed against the sand when the wind was still. He felt it first when he returned one morning from searching for supplies. His sharp eyes noticed new tracks near the edge of his shelter. Heavy boots, more than one set, pressing into the ground. Someone had been watching. Inside, the girl noticed his tense expression. Her golden eyes flickered with worry as she asked softly, "What is wrong?" He did not hide the truth. "Others have found signs of us. They may come here." Her claws tightened against the blanket, her wings twitching with unease. She knew what that meant. To scavengers, she was not a girl. She was treasure. Rare, valuable, a living being that could be sold to the highest bidder. Her voice trembled when she whispered, "They will take me." He crouched near her, his voice steady but fierce. "No, I will not let them." The words burned with conviction, but deep inside he felt the weight of the threat. He was only one man with little more than scraps for weapons. But he also knew that walking away was no longer possible. He had chosen her, and that choice demanded courage. That night, the first test came. The fire inside the shelter had burned low, and the wind outside carried voices. Harsh laughter, boots crunching against gravel, the sound of metal striking. Metal. Scavengers were near. He moved silently, gripping the iron pipe he kept beside the door. His body pressed against the wall as shadows stretched outside. A group of 3 men walked slowly between the wrecks, their torches cutting beams of light through the dark. One of them spoke loudly, his tone mocking. "They say someone's hiding a dragon in these parts. Imagine the price it would fetch." The others laughed, their voices cruel. The girl trembled inside, curling beneath the blanket, but he raised a hand to calm her. His heart pounded, but his eyes burned with resolve. The scavengers drew closer, their footsteps echoing. One of them paused, his torch sweeping across the ground near the shelter. For a moment, silence fell. Then came the words that chilled the air. "Tracks. Fresh ones." The man stepped forward, ready to push the door open. But before he could, the human moved. He burst from the shadows, pipe in hand, striking the man's arm with a force that made him drop the torch. The firelight scattered across the sand as the scavenger cried out. The others shouted, pulling crude blades from their belts. The fight was rough, sharp, and desperate. He swung again, blocking a knife, his arms shaking with the effort. The men were stronger in number, but he fought with something greater than strength. He fought with purpose. The girl watched from inside, her eyes wide, fear and guilt mixing in her chest. She wanted to help, but her body was still weak. All she could do was whisper softly as if sending him courage. "Do not fall." The clash ended as quickly as it began. One man fled with a bleeding arm, another stumbled back into the shadows, cursing, and the last lay groaning in the dirt. The human stood above them, chest heaving, his pipe slick with sweat and dust. His body ached, his hands trembled, but his spirit did not break. He turned back to the shelter, his eyes meeting hers. She looked at him not with fear, but with something far deeper. Trust. He returned inside, setting the pipe aside. She reached for his hand, her claws curling gently around his fingers. Her voice was weak, yet filled with conviction. "You fight, for me." He nodded, sitting beside her. "And I will fight again no matter how many come." The firelight flickered against their faces, painting shadows across the walls. Outside, the night stretched on, filled with unseen threats. But inside that small shelter, a promise had been made. The junkyard was no longer just a place of ruin. It was a battlefield, and on it stood one human who refused to surrender and one dragon girl whose life was no longer forgotten. The danger had returned, but so had the strength of his resolve. The junkyard had grown restless. After the fight, the air itself seemed heavier, as if danger lingered in every shadow. He knew the scavengers would not stop. Word would spread quickly. Someone had found a dragon girl, a prize too rare to ignore. More would come, and they would come prepared. Inside the shelter, the girl rested with her back against the wall, her golden eyes never leaving him. She had seen the way he fought, the way he bled for her, and her heart carried a question she could not silence. Why? Why would a human risk so much for someone cast aside by her own people? She asked in a trembling voice. Why? Fight for me? I am only a burden. He looked at her, his face tired, but his gaze steady. You are not a burden. You are alive. That is enough. His words struck her deeper than blades ever could. For the first time in her life, someone had told her she was worth saving. The following days became a test of endurance. He fortified the shelter with scraps of metal and wood, turning it into a fortress as best he could. He searched for food, carried water, and watched the horizon with unblinking eyes. She grew stronger each day, her scales regaining their glow, her wings twitching with new life. Yet the fear of what lay beyond never left them. One night the danger returned in full. A larger group of scavengers surrounded the junkyard, their torches burning like angry stars. Their leader shouted, his voice sharp and cruel, "Bring out the dragon human. She belongs to us now. Refuse, and you will die with her." The girl trembled, her body tense with fear. She had been abandoned once before, and she feared it would happen again. She whispered, her voice breaking, "Go. Leave me. If they find me, they will spare you." But he shook his head, his voice firm as steel. "No, I will not abandon you. Not now. Not ever." He stepped outside, the firelight from the scavengers reflecting in his eyes. He held no sword, no shield, only his iron pipe and the fire of his will. The men laughed at him, mocking his courage, but he did not waver. "You see a prize," he said, his voice echoing across the ruins. "But she is not yours. She is not property. She is not something to be sold. She is a life, and I will defend her with mine." The scavengers jeered, rushing forward. The fight was brutal, steel against steel, fists against flesh. He fought with every ounce of strength left in him. For each blow he took, he struck back harder. His body screamed in pain, but his spirit burned brighter. He was not fighting only for survival. He was fighting for what it meant to be human. Inside the shelter, the girl's eyes widened. She had never seen such defiance. Her people had taught her that strength was everything. Yet this human strength was not in his body, but in his heart. He fought not for glory, not for pride, but for her. The battle raged until the scavengers faltered. Some fled into the night, others lay broken in the dust, their torches dying one by one. At last, silence returned to the junkyard, broken only by his ragged breath. Bloodied but unbroken, he staggered back inside. She reached for him, her claws trembling, and caught his hand. Tears filled her golden eyes as she whispered, "Why would you suffer this? For me?" He sank to his knees beside her, his voice low but unwavering. "Because humanity is not measured by how we treat the strong. It is measured by how we protect the weak. And as long as I live, you will never be alone again." Her tears fell freely, and with them came something new: faith. She pressed her forehead to his hand, whispering words he had never expected to hear. "You are my family now." The firelight flickered across their faces, sealing a bond stronger than blood. A human who refused to surrender, and an alien dragon girl who had been cast aside but was no longer forgotten. In that moment, the junkyard was no longer a place of ruin. It became a place of rebirth, where humanity's heart was revealed not through power but through compassion. And though the stars above watched in silence, they too seemed to burn brighter, as if honoring the choice that had changed both their lives forever.